Building and nurturing a developer community is hard work, but it is vital for the growth of a country's technology ecosystem. When communities coalesce around programming languages, tools, or programming methods, what follows is a network of conferences, meetups, and other similar events. Juan Pablo Buriticá, VP of Engineering at Splice, has spent the last decade building developer communities in his home country of Colombia and across Latin America, as well as running distributed engineering teams. He has helped to launch a number of conferences, meetups, and more recently, an online meetup providing advanced technical information for native Spanish speakers. In today's episode, Juan returns to Software Engineering Daily to speak with Carl Mungazi about the benefits of having a distributed engineering team and hiring developers from developing nations. He discusses how Colombia came to have the largest Spanish-speaking JavaScript community in the world, and the importance of good communication when building software with a team of developers based around the world. Grammatech Code Sonar helps development teams improve code quality with static analysis. It helps flag issues early in the development process, allowing developers to release better code faster. Code Sonar can easily be integrated into any development process. Code Sonar performs advanced static analysis of C, C++, Java, and even raw binary code. Code Sonar performs unique data flow and symbolic execution analysis to aggressively scan for problems in your code. Just like battleships use sonar to detect objects deep underwater, engineers use Code Sonar to detect subtle problems deep within their code. Go to go.grammatech.com/sedaily to get your free 30-day trial exclusively for Software Engineering Daily listeners. Code Sonar analyzes your code and it delivers a detailed report. The Code Sonar user interface provides all the information that you need to quickly understand the reports, follow cross-functional paths, understand cross-references, quickly navigate between files, and visualize large pieces of your code. Go to go.grammatech.com/sedaily to get your 30-day free trial and unleash the power of advanced static analysis. Thanks to Grammatech for being a sponsor of Software Engineering Daily.
So Juan, thank you so much for joining me today on Software Engineering Daily. We've been here before. Just before we begin, would you mind just give me a brief background as to what you're doing now from the last time you were on the show?
Sure. I just joined, well, not just, but recently, about 6 months ago, I joined a company called Splice to lead their engineering team. The last time I was here, I was working at Ride, which was a carpooling startup. Its parent's company got acquired and the sort of innovation lab was shut down, but I was able to move forward pretty quickly with Splice, which is a music software production company. We built, it's similar to similar to a GitHub for musicians, and we could go in depth if you wanted to, but that's what it, yeah.
Okay. And that's something I'll definitely want to talk to you about later. But before we get to that, your biography in Medium states that you build effective distributed engineering teams and Latin American communities. What does that process look like?
So it's very different for both endeavors, but one basically is my hobby. I'm building communities in Latin America, and the other one just happens to be what I've specialized my work at, right? I became a software engineer by kind of accident, and then I ended up finding myself in sort of leadership positions or tech lead positions or management positions, and then I eventually embraced it. But the process, I assume that you want to know, is it about the Latin American communities, or is it both, or which ones?
I think we can start with the Latin American communities and how you've gone about doing that. I mean, I guess my first question would be, from your work that you've done, what would you say are the key ingredients to building and nurturing a successful community of developers?
So the most successful sort of process or work that I've done is just leverage local communities and set sort of set role models in places where they can share their knowledge. So I've been doing this for about 7 years, and I've done it in different capacities. I've started with software conferences. I've organized now 8 events or 9 events in Colombia, except for one in New York where I participated once, co-organized. But I hosted the first open source technology conference ever in Colombia. That was in 2011. And since then, I started doing a lot of the local work. It ended up leading to starting several meetups from New York, mostly specific focus on JavaScript, but that has triggered a lot of other technologies being interested in sort of like replicating a lot of the work. I mean, it's also happened in other countries in Latin America, in the Caribbean, in Venezuela, and the southern cone, or like what we call Argentina, Chile. So it's been pretty successful in general, but there's just been a combination of things we've done, mostly from the states downwards and also locally.
So in that process, as you're working and building your communities, how do you measure the health of a group of developers who are growing and becoming a wider community? What things are you looking out for?
The things I'm constantly looking out for are, first, well, the most telling sign is the attendance to the events. I think how fast JSConf Colombia sells out is now my metric. Right now, this year for our event, we've published our ticket batches, and they've sold out within the next 10 to 15 minutes, and we've sold 180 tickets in that manner. So that tells me that there's a lot of desire to belong and to attend. It's also like it is an affordable conference, but it is still expensive for the region. So it is a sign that it is a very healthy local community.
And in doing so, what would you say are the challenges of building a community from scratch when you have no kind of place to start in terms of conferences, in terms of meetups, in terms of just a general culture of having that community of developers?
So there's 3 main challenges, but being in a different language adds an additional one. So the first one is you need to build an ecosystem, and that you actually literally need to build the community. So the initial event usually means breaking a lot of ground, finding a venue, finding content, doing a lot of local marketing, and then being consistent. I remember that the first Bogota JS meetup had like 5 or 6 attendees. We still made it every month on a similar date, and we kept it being consistent until more people found out about it, and then it became something constant, and now it's been going for 6 years. So the first one is that establishing some regularity in access to content. The second one, which is very much tied into it, is finding content that people are interested in, specifically in Latin America. And I don't know if this relates to other developing nations, but finding people who have interesting experiences from software perspective, who are also interested in sharing, who are also in a position that their work allows them to talk about what they're doing, is extremely hard. So unless you have high density of software companies or software experience in your locality, you're probably going to have to give a lot of those talks yourself. I mean, it's one of the things that we did, right? A lot of the organizers wrote a lot of content and then gave talks and talks until we motivated a lot more people to join. That's the second challenge. The third challenge is finding a team of volunteers or co-organizers who are willing to do basically free work for the love of the art. It's also like leading teams of volunteers is a little challenging because there's no compensation. Like when you have employees, you tell them, well, I pay you to do this. But in open source communities, there's no pay. So it's sometimes harder to find people who are really experienced. So you have to sort of like deal with whoever is very interested and very motivated. Lastly, the majority of content for software engineering is in English. The majority of groundbreaking or very modern content is written in English. So the blog posts, the talks, everything is in English, even documentation. That makes it harder. So it adds like an extreme difficulty level to any communities that are in nations that don't have a high population of English speakers.
So this is something you've done for the past 7 years, and in that time, which languages, in terms of programming languages, have grown to have more active members across Latin America? For example, I know that Colombia has the largest Spanish-speaking JS community in the world. Are there any other languages also with a quite active membership?
Yeah, so JavaScript is definitely leading. We've invested a lot of effort in JavaScript. It's also very common desired skill. So definitely, I'd say that JavaScript, other than Java and C#, which are usually very enterprise desired languages and something that's very strong in Latin America, mostly from an industry desirability, JavaScript is top. I think there was Brazil has a very big Ruby community. Argentina has a very still healthy Ruby community. I think Chile, Uruguay, it is evolving, like it is happening in across the globe where Ruby is. They're either moving towards Go or moving towards Rust or Elixir. There is still a lot of Ruby in shops and in development in the region, but I think the communities are becoming a little bit more diverse in the languages that they understand. I think Python is growing, and then I think ultimately we're specializing, right? I think Argentina, there's a couple of mobile only conferences and meetups. Elixir, I have seen a couple of things. There's a lot of interest in functional programming. Overall, it's very broad, the interests. We still haven't gone to specialize. Specialization has probably happened around JavaScript frameworks, because there are a lot of different individual meetups for Ember or React or Angular or Meteor or Node. So that I think to me the sign of a mature community, which I relate to in New York, is that when you have more than one meetup of the same language, but that specializes in a specific either tool or cross section of it, it's a sign that there's enough density for enough interest for this specific technology, and that it's maturing. Like you can I think New York has probably like at least over 15 JavaScript meetups, if not more. So I'm sure San Francisco and Boston have at least more than 2. So it's just I try to see that in Latin America, and what I see growing, definitely JavaScript is very healthy. I think right now we have 12 meetups in Colombia. I think we have over 4,000 or 5,000 members. No, actually no. Bogota JS, I think, is around 2,800 members, and Medellin JS is around the same, or probably a little bit more. So just in the 2 main meetups, we have around 6,000 members that rotate in attendance. So that's sort of where we stand.
Yeah. So as I was doing my research on kind of the work you've done before, I came across a blog post you wrote in 2015, and in it you made the argument that Colombia did not have a lack of engineers, but rather a lack of companies with attractive engineering cultures. Why is having a good engineering culture important?
What I've found in my empirical experience is that engineers, more than anything, are interested in learning, or we're driven by learning. But we're of course in a segment of an industry that is having sort of a bonanza, so we can get to be very picky on where we work at, because there's enough of work, there's enough money going around that we can afford to choose. When you look at the region of Latin America, the majority of industry jobs that are available are 2 kinds. First one, enterprise level software, banks, insurance companies, very, very enterprisey level software development. And the second one it's consulting, or software factories, what we call them there. There's a lot of outsourcing and nearshoring. We're you can see it in the States. We're marketed in the States as a better offshoring, and that's why it's called nearshoring, right? Oh, we're in the same time zone, we're culturally similar, we also speak English, and we're also cheap, and that's what we're selling outside of our region. That just means that that's the 2 options that you have. There are companies, of course, and now like lately more and more startups that are either technical in nature or service oriented that have interesting positions, but then we haven't really copied the culture or like healthy cultures of software. So we don't develop a lot of communities. We don't. I know, of course, there are exceptions. I know of companies. There's few companies who I respect on an engineering culture level locally, but it is not the norm where there's a lot of respect for the craft or a lot of respect for the contribution or a lot of respect for the process of building software. And I think when you're competing, right, if given an option and you have two identical companies and one respects the craft of software, it is, in my experience, and that's all I have to go for, it is more likely that people will choose the one that respects the craft than the one that respects or that offers either a higher salary or different things. We're interested in solving problems at a software level, and that is also something that comes across with cultures that are very engineering driven, because we're probably going to automate a lot of the processes. We're going to write many things internally and invest in optimizing many workflows rather than just ship a product, like build a product for someone else and then ship it and not see it grow or scale. So that's a very short summary of that very long article.
So should we then say that when companies sometimes complain about having a lack of good engineers, should they first look at fixing their cultures before saying that there are no good engineers, because maybe they are not coming to them because they don't think they respect the craft as you have explained?
Absolutely. I think some of what the Silicon Valley culture has spread around the world is this entitlement towards engineering talent, is the fact that people believe that they deserve great engineers and just show me your GitHub, but our company doesn't contribute back, or we have no open source projects, or we've never even sponsored $50 for a meetup. The attitude is very entitled. It's like, hey, it's also very short-sighted. It's saying that there's no engineers because no one wants to work with you is a big problem. And if you can't be self-aware of the fact that people don't want to work for your company, and it's not that you can't find them or you can't attract them, or there's nothing really compelling of what you're offering, is the first step. Recognizing that is the first step towards actually fixing your culture. Asking for a GitHub profile has become almost default. But then if you're a candidate and you ask for the GitHub profile of a company, and you look that they have 0 open source projects and there's been 0 contributions, and people are not allowed to do contributions to open source on the dime, and they're sort of like software open source leeches. They use all of the technology available, but they haven't even invested in their own neighborhood to give back or pay it forward. So to answer your question, I think the first step for people to actually find great talent and be able to nurture and sort of recruit is recognize that they are not entitled to great engineering if they are not, well, period. But in order to attract great engineers, they need to be attractive.
Spring Framework gives developers an environment for building cloud-native projects. On December 4th through 7th, Spring One Platform is coming to San Francisco. Spring One Platform is a conference where developers congregate to explore the latest technologies in the Spring ecosystem and beyond. Speakers at Spring One Platform include Eric Brewer, who created the CAP theorem, Vaughn Vernon, who writes extensively about domain-driven design, and many thought leaders in the Spring ecosystem. Spring One Platform is the premier conference for those who build, deploy, and run cloud-native software. Software Engineering Daily listeners can sign up with the discount code SEDaily100 and receive $100 off of a Spring One Platform conference pass, while also supporting Software Engineering Daily. I will also be at Spring One reporting on developments in the cloud-native ecosystem. I would love to see you there and have a discussion with you. Join me December 4th through 7th at the Spring One Platform Conference and use discount code SEDaily100 for $100 off of your conference pass. That's SEDaily100, all one word, for the promo code. Thanks to Pivotal for organizing Spring One Platform and for sponsoring Software Engineering Daily.
So, with the experience that you have of creating communities of developers, have you come to have a framework, if you like, which other engineers elsewhere can use as a template for also having their own communities kickstarted as well? Because last month or 2 months ago, I was speaking to someone from Zambia in Africa, and he is a co-founder of a tech hub, and he's trying to develop the Zambian communities of developers. And he was telling me that the things he was finding hard to do, like the challenges he had. So from what you've done, do you have a framework that they can maybe use to help them in their situation to grow their community much faster?
I do have a recipe. I've also been meaning to write this down somewhere, and I'm going to have to do it over the next few weeks. But especially seeing that we're talking about this, and it'll probably become a little popular. But my recipe is the following. I have something that I personally call my empanada fund, and I motivate local people in Latin America to start a meetup, and I tell them that I will fund the empanadas and the beverages for their first event. In addition to that, I will give them the following advice. First, you find a venue that will let you have 10 to 20 people together in an afternoon that is easily accessible to people in the either in the industry after they're going to work. It's very important to have a venue. Then find a place that you want me to buy this food from and help me make it happen. Second, find 1 or 2 speakers locally in your community, or even reach out to people overseas who may be willing to give remote, like Skype talks or Hangout talks, because that may also be very, very attractive to bring some people interested in your event. Meetup.com is very easy to set up. Sometimes, especially outside of the United States, it has a cost, and it's sometimes easier to just have a little simple Eventbrite or other kind of event management systems to set it up for the first time to make sure that you're not committing to something that maybe doesn't develop. But finding a place where people can sign up, you can keep their email addresses so you can build a newsletter eventually, is important. And then that's it. That's basically all you really need to make sure that your first event happens, right? 2 speakers are enough. Make sure that there's content that's relevant, that you can try to have a theme, then make it happen. Go set it at least 30 days in the future. Open a Twitter account, open a Facebook account, and just start telling people as much as you can about this. There's social media marketing strategies, like follow a lot of local people who are in the industry, tell your friends, tell them to share. If you get 5 people, that's a great start, because what you'll have developing is a small study group of people who are interested in the same things and who are willing to, in their free personal time, attend and collaborate. Then try to get one of those members who attended to help you. Motivate them to give a talk about something that they're doing at work, something that they liked. I've learned more about software by speaking about it. And it's if you can encourage other people to do the same, there's usually something that they've done in the past locally, it will have an impact. And then the last part of the recipe is consistency. Make it happen every month, even if only 3 people show up. It will I think if you're in a small town, very, very small town, it may be very difficult. But if you're in a good enough density, there will be at least 5 people who will become regulars, and you have a study group there. And then you can probably start motivating, let's experiment once a month, or let's try something different. And it will build if it becomes dependable. If it is the 3rd Wednesday of every month, you know that this event will happen even if it rains, if there's no power. People will meet and talk about software because they like. I've seen it work more than 20 times with this in very remote places in Latin America. So I don't see why it can't work in many others. This is sort of the recipe that I found.
Okay. And in doing so, should the person doing it be prepared as well for the financial cost? And I say this because in past interviews, I've heard you mention that it took a while for your conferences in Colombia to become profitable. So can you speak to the cost financially of doing such an endeavor?
So meetups are much more affordable than large-scale events. It took a while for Bogotá.js to get some regular income, mostly because local companies just don't understand the benefit of community, and they assume that if they're sponsoring a meetup, they're immediately going to hire a lot of people, and they don't, and they just get disappointed, and they don't really have a vision. I try, like, if you can't afford it, and you're really as invested, and you're like in a privileged position like I am, where I could donate a lot of my time and some of my money towards the costs, then do so. But there's a risk, right? The reason why I like small meetups is because they're manageable, and you can sort of do it in a very DIY fashion. If you can convince a company that has a conference room to loan it to you, try to convince your boss, like, hey, I want to meet I want to meet here once a month, talk to a local bar, talk to a local community center that will, maybe university, try to keep it at zero. Food, that's why I sponsored the first meetup ever. It's because people will go and enjoy some food together. If you can get your community to chip in, that's also useful sometimes. I know that in developing nations, we don't necessarily either have access to credit, to like digital payment methods. That's a big problem in Colombia, right? That, like, for example, we can't charge $2 to attendees because not everyone, like, I think the credit card or debit card penetration is like 30% in the entire country. So we're just leaving a lot of people out. But charge at the door, say like, hey, it's going to be $1 to come in, and we're going to give you soda or water or something. Try to keep costs at a minimum. If you really want to invest in it, then try to keep it manageable. I don't like using the example of my conferences because I definitely lost a lot of money, or not lost, invested a lot of money that I never got back. but it took 5 years. It was my 5th conference was the first one that made money. I don't call it profitable because we're a non-profit, but it was very different in New York. When I co-organized in New York, in Paris, it was, I think, well, Charlie Robbins is great at fundraising, but it was a very different, like, it was very straightforward to sell sponsorships. People really understand the value of it, other than just recruiting. In Colombia, only until now, Bogotá.js found a permanent sort of sponsor for a venue, which was super challenging. And if you imagine in a city of 12 million people with a lot of industry, you would expect it to happen faster. So I don't want to destroy hopes, but I do want to set up the fact that it's difficult and it requires perseverance. It's entrepreneurship, but it's also entrepreneurship, which in the end you do all the work, and you're just left with the satisfaction that you motivated and you opened spaces for other people. Like, I'm very, very proud of what we've done, and I haven't done this by myself. There's an incredible team of people behind everything, but there's no glamour behind community building.
Now, a byproduct of your work building communities is that you gained access to a network of developers across the region. And a few years ago, you gave a talk at AutoConf about your time at Ride building a team that was distributed. And you said doing so gave your company an advantage. Why was that? Yes,
you did some pretty good research. That's so far one of my favorite talks. So we're at a stage in the software industry where there's this drive for diversity and this drive for opening and hiring talent, and there's all these interests, but ultimately building software teams is really, really hard. And the majority of the networks are very, very tapped, right? There's very popular companies that attract a ton of talent and everyone wants to work for, and then the rest of probably either less experienced engineers, junior engineers and less experienced is a similar thing, or people who are probably not necessarily interested in in your industry. Like if you're building an insurance startup, you need software engineers, but not everyone is excited about insurance. So you're going to have to sometimes compromise on different things. And one of the advantages that or side effects that I really wasn't planning for, because I wasn't planning to become a manager or an engineering leader from my communities, was access to a lot of talent of people who are passionate about software, have probably not have access to great opportunities locally, so they're not extremely experienced, but very, very good. So I've been able to hire much faster than I would have normally, compete in a different level, and also diversify the backgrounds of my teams. Because yes, they've generally been very Latin American heavy, but culturally I've had people from very diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, from very different racial makeup, gender makeup. It's ultimately, yes, they're heavy. Like for example, right now I think 5 or 6 of my engineers at Splice are Colombian, but they all come from so many different backgrounds that they add a lot of very interesting experiences to our team. And we have like our CTO is French, and like we're super spread out as far as where we come from. It's also given me access to people who are not on the radar of large companies, where I can help them grow, and in the same manner that they grow, get some really great people to work with me. Like for example, right now there's a Slack of Colombian developers that we started with our community, which is like only invite only. You have to, like, your friend invites you into it, and there's 1,000 engineers there. There's 1,000 Colombian. They're all Colombian.
Wow.
Yeah. We're constantly just talking about different software problems, or like it's like a mini Stack Overflow. We're about to reach the Slack limit for free community, but it's pretty cool, and we've been able to maintain the code of conduct, because that's why we made it like semi-exclusive. I would have wanted to open it up, but there's a lot of cultural development that we have to do. But in general, you wouldn't even imagine, like these people who argue that there's an engineering deficit in the country, which specifically even come from the industry or the government. They would never believe that there's 1,000 people who are interested or professionals in softwares in the same space, and it's right there.
So at Splice, how does the makeup of your team being distributed, how does this affect how you actually engineer and actually do the work that you do every day?
So the only thing that it affects is communication. It makes communication a little more explicit. Yes, we need to over communicate, and yes, we need to use the right channels, but I do have one constraint. The only constraint I have in my team is time zone. So we work on the Americas time zone, Pacific to Eastern. Sometimes there's the language barrier, and I think in this case at Splice, we are an American company. I do want to build an American team, as much as, yes, I am Latin American, and I have a bias for the region. I still think that I owe a lot to this country, and I want to figure out how to replicate some of the community or recruiting stuff that I've done in developing nations, and how it maps to underdeveloped regions within the United States. So that's something that probably in the long term I would like to try to see how I can do. But ultimately, as long as we communicate really, really well, and we use the proper channels to communicate, like we don't broadcast a lot of information on Slack, because we have a saying that Slack is for gifts, and like only casual conversation happens in Slack. And if you need to say something important, send it by email, or have a call if you think that the tone is not coming across properly because you maybe write in a passive aggressive manner. Those things are the only really, not difficulty, but challenge. You have to be very conscious of how you're communicating, or what you're communicating, and where information lives, because co-located teams just get that for free just by being in the same location. So you don't have to focus on how you share information. That's why when companies who are co-located grow after a certain size, they have a huge communication breakdown, because once you have 40 people in the same place, you can't keep everyone in sync. And your entire communication strategy breaks down. If you're always conscious of the fact that there's a physical limitation and that you have to commit information to writing and you have to broadcast it and share it, it actually makes it easier for you to grow. So I think it's an advantage in the majority of cases. I miss it. I like having people next to me, right? I really love the people who I work with, and I wish I could have everyone close to me all the time. But I think it's a trade-off I'm willing to live with.
Look for a job more efficiently with Indeed Prime. Indeed Prime flips the job search model and lets you find a job more efficiently even while you're busy with other engineering work or coding your side project. You simply upload your resume, and in one click, you get immediate exposure to companies like Facebook, Uber, and Dropbox. The employers that are interested will reach out to you within 1 week with salary, position, and equity up front. Don't let applying for jobs become a full-time job itself. With Indeed Prime, the jobs come to you. The average software developer gets 5 employer contacts and an average salary offer of $125,000 through Indeed Prime. It's 100% free for candidates. There are no strings attached. Sign up now at Indeed.com/SEDaily. Thank you to Indeed Prime for being a repeat sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. And if you want to support the show while looking for a new job, go to Indeed.com/SEDaily.
So over there at Splice, what is your tech stack, and what kind of challenges are you currently tackling at the moment in terms of engineering challenges?
Well, our tech stack is very vanilla in the way that we try to keep it as standard as we can, because we are more interested in solving industry challenges than just playing with a lot of interesting technologies. Our backend is all Go. Matt, our CTO, has committed to Go for a very long time. I think we've been using Go in production for a very long time. He comes from a Ruby background. He's written a lot of different languages, but he was a big Rubyist, and he committed to Go. So our API and our backend services are all Go. We use Elasticsearch for some stuff. We have a MySQL database that we rely on heavily. Everything is hosted on AWS. We have a native app that we actually just rewrote. It was a native Objective-C and a native C# app, but we just launched. We're about to replace the production installments for an app that's Electron. So it uses Electron, the interfaces HTML and CSS in Angular JS. There's a Go bridge that communicates via RPC to a lot of the gRPC to a lot of the low-level processes. And then there's the old Objective-C and C# code that we're slowly going to replace with Go as much as we can. And then our web stack is a mix of Angular 1, Angular 2 RC5, and then Angular 2 and Angular 4. I think there's just very different flavors of, depending on what we could do at the time, we would use one or the other. But I'm very happy to say that over the last 6 months, we've been investing a lot in our web stack. We've reduced the load time from about 6 seconds to under 1.5 in the majority of our web. Splice.com doesn't load that fast yet, but within the next 3 weeks, I'm pretty sure it will. But that's it. We're betting on Angular mostly because we believe in a lot of the things that it was set to early on, and now it's pretty ingrained in our software. So we're gonna invest in it as much as we can. We believe that we can give back to the community as well. Okay. And then Go.
So let's say I happen to get a job at Splice and I'm based in the UK. What would the onboarding process be like for me, and how long would it take in that system that you have set up at the moment?
So the system that I have set up at the moment is very drafted, right? I think one of the things I haven't been able to invest in a lot yet is more of these onboarding and scaling processes, which is one of the reasons why I'm hiring management, right? But the way it would look like, and it would actually look for NG where she starts in a couple of weeks. So I'm right now planning a 30 and a 60 and a 90-day plan for her. So she has clear objectives of what she needs to learn about our stack or our product or our company at different milestones. So you're basically given a plan of at least the things that I would like you to know by a certain amount of time. You'll be given homework on some of the onboarding things that we'd like you to research, because us being a startup that has moved very fast, it also means that a lot of people who wrote many of the things are not here anymore, and we have to do some archaeology. So I take the advantage of treating new onboardees as archaeologists and historians, software historians. So I'll probably write things that are not clear, the questions that are not clear, the things that are not clear. You should probably write your task with writing those as a question so we can answer them for future employees. And it's also, as much as you can help us answer those. And then there's a rotation into our engineering support team, which is this comes from my kitchen background, which is basically I like doing a rotation around different disciplines, similar to like how some kitchens rotate people through stations. And support is how we support the entire company. Basically, it's not only customer support, but it's also if marketing needs data, or they need to send a new campaign, or they need a new HTML template, or we need to look at some Mixpanel event that wasn't firing properly. Like there's a dose of very interesting tasks that are very technical that no one side of engineering team can solve, and it gives you a great overview of where everything stands. You're of course not by yourself. You go on duty with one of our engineers who is experienced, who knows where everything is, and you have the support of everyone in the engineering team. But you would probably spend there a couple of weeks until we can decide what product team or what product you'll be working on, or what feature you'll be working on, and then you move slowly into that, attend a lot of those meetings and coordinate a lot of those things. In addition to that, you get to participate in all the technical discussions that we have, which are we do all of our technical discussions over RFCs. So basically every time one of our team members needs to do an important engineering change or update or feature, they're asked to propose the change to the team in a pull request of a technical document that doesn't really need to be very heavy in nature, but it needs to explain how certain thing is going to be implemented, why the approach is being taken, and then open the discussion for a couple of days for the rest of the team to give their opinion. Ultimately, they are responsible for implementing, and unless our CTO or myself see either a high technical risk or a business risk, usually people are very independent in moving forward with that. So you get to participate in very deep technical discussions early on, and also see the past decisions we've made. And this is something that we invest, like it becomes a lot more valuable as time goes on. We don't have I think we have like 15 or 20 RFCs, some that are still open, some that we haven't really paid a lot of attention on. But it's an interesting insight into how we work. So you get to see that from day one.
Okay. As a follow-on to that question as well, when would you say is the best time in a developer's career to join a remote engineering team? So, for example, in my case, I've only been a coder for like the last year. So, would you say that after a year is a good time, or maybe I should wait a bit longer, or is there no time to join a team remotely, in your opinion?
It depends on the supporting structures that your company has. I prefer not to bring at Ride, the couple of junior engineers who I hired, they had people locally to support them they could co-work at least 3 times a week or 2 times a week, and they could have guidance and not feel lonely. So it really depends on that. I am not a fan of bringing inexperienced engineers into very heavy remote cultures, because those are they expect a lot of self-management and self-discipline and ability to sort of communicate really, really well. And sometimes you're just not either used to or don't have the expectations set on how those things work. And it may be a disservice to your... Yeah, I think it's just unfair to expect to put so many high expectations on that. I'd say I'd wait a couple of years until I've worked worked with the team and really gotten a sense of myself on how I work, probably start trying to get a hybrid role where I can work from home at least once or twice a week before I really move to a remote or a fully remote position. There's so many unwritten rules about companies, especially companies that are moving super fast, that participating and being completely immersed in all these things, in product discussions, in just random office life, I think it's very, very important. And then making the choice, I'm fine with not being exposed to all those things is useful. But if not, and you have the misfortune of joining a company that may not be 100% remote or very remote friendly, you may just feel either isolated or be excluded from important information, and that's just frustrating.
And on that point, actually, what then is the process by which at Splice you come to decisions in which all your engineers, remote and not remote, feel included, and that they actually are being thought about as you and Matt and other leaders are making choices about engineering matters?
Okay, so people who feel included in decisions, is this generally specifically about hiring or about how we work or make technical decisions?
Our purpose is just how you work in general, as to how you actually go about your daily duties and weekly and monthly kind of sprints, I guess, as well.
Okay, so we open spaces. So there's two kinds of communication. There's the push communication and the pull communication, right? Just like in systems. I expect from more of the senior or more experienced engineers to be able to bubble up information so that I don't have to go query it. And that's part of, so that is not a part of them feeling included. I expect that the entire team is bringing up information as it goes. I, of course, have spaces for them, like my regular one-on-ones, where I sort of do my check-ins and make sure that everything is working well with everyone. But everyone is expected to keep their peers and the engineering team up to date with things that are going. So for that, we try to do, if it's technical decisions, that's how we use the RFCs. If it's project updates, we have sometimes stand-ups, depending on the size of the team or who's running a team, stand-ups or emails or just different mechanisms to make sure that everyone knows what it is. In regards to me keeping everyone included, every 4 to 6 weeks, I have an engineering staff meeting where I sort of share a lot of the information about where the company is at, where the company is going, where our team is at, where our team is going, and open the questions for open the floor for questions of the team. In addition to that, we have a bi-weekly or weekly town hall for the entire company. So that's where the entire team gets to see where we're at as a company, how we're progressing, who is hired, who is coming on board, just have regular updates of what's going on. We have engineering update, product update, a business update, marketing update, and then we just end the call with every office letting one of our team members update. So in New York says something, and then everyone who's remote says something about their day or what they're doing on the weekend, that sort of stuff. And finally, we organize our technical teams in what we call working groups. These are more disciplinary. So we have the front-end working group and the back-end working group and the QA working group. And these have regular either weekly or bi-weekly meetings that are more around specific problems to that team. So in the back-end team, we talk about specific either API challenges or database disks are growing or Elasticsearch is being difficult. Front-end, where you can be talking about performance or updates or modifications or that sort of stuff, like very sort of maintenance related. And same for QA. And then we open those spaces for people to give their opinions about our existing strategy, their concerns, things that we should really solve it at an engineering level. And then Matt and I are involved in all those at different layers. I think Matt covers a lot more of the specific technical needs, and he guides the team with updates and technical improvements and technical modifications. And I'm more on the people end. But that's how we ensure that we have those spaces. And I think as we grow, we're not that many right now. But as we grow, a lot of these things are going to have to be committed more into written medium and become a little bit more asynchronous. We haven't had that big of a challenge with yet.
Okay. So moving on now back to Latin America, What would you say is the current state of the Latin American tech ecosystem?
I would say it's rough. I think it's nascent, but it's rough. And I think it's very difficult to group the entire region as a whole, because the local dynamics have a huge impact on the maturity of each ecosystem. I think Argentina and Chile are particularly very advanced culturally and technologically. I think Argentina in general has always had a very different. Argentina and Uruguay have always had a very different cultural sort of sense of self than the rest of Latin America. You can see that in a lot of very creative approaches to technology or to art or design or music. I think Mercado Libre, which is the Latin American eBay, has huge offices there, and it has had a huge impact in the region. They survived the .com boom, and in a lot of the sort of the investment there is very visible. Chile had a great government program that's called Startup Chile.
Yes.
Where the government just invests a bunch of money in local startups, and they're bringing not just local but also international, and that's brought a lot of external expertise. It's changed the mentality of Chileans as how they approach technology, and I think it's been really interesting. Brazil is a continent on its own, pretty much. It's got a huge economy, a very large population, a very different language. So I consider Brazil even like its own mini continent, and they're very far ahead. They have a lot of they're a very sort of developing nation. They're one of the largest economies too in the world. So I think Colombia I know a lot about. Colombia is moving forward. I'd love for it if a lot of the programs that the government is trying to fund or finance were less entrepreneurship driven, more infrastructural. I think we lack a lot of infrastructure as far as like our mail system doesn't work, so you really can't have successful sort of delivery services, and our payment systems and regulation is super challenging because we have a very dark history of money laundering and money transactions that just requires us to have a lot of difficulties around moving money, and that just makes local companies, it has a lot of obstacles for local companies to transact online. And in general, there's too much focus on exporting labor, right? I think it's too convenient for companies to hire, sort of do this nearshoring, and because it's more affordable and cheaper and it makes so much sense, but we're just on the wrong end of that. I think it may be a short-term bonanza for a lot of people who own those companies. We're not investing a lot in the deep technical knowledge and deep technical experience that will come handy down the line. Venezuela has lost a lot of talent, unfortunately. I think I know a little bit less about Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, but I'm sure like I've seen very similar patterns of nearshoring or offshoring and a lot of software factories and less creative products. An interesting pattern is there's a lot of social entrepreneurship, which is pretty cool, and I see a lot more interest in products that have a deeper impact, social impact, than what comes generally from the valley. Mexico, the majority of its talent leaves to the Bay Area, but they also have a very, very different cultural approach towards technology, and it's the great products come from Mexico. And in general, Central America is in this similar position to probably Colombia or Peru or Ecuador, where there's just lower density, a lot of outsourcing. I think one of the patterns that I would like to break away from is what I call we call the tropicalization of Silicon Valley, which is basically taking validated models, business models, and then just rebuilding them locally. So there was a local Groupon, there's a local Uber, there's a local Seamless, there's a local SoulCycle, there's a local ClassPass, there's a local everything. And it makes a lot of sense because someone else took the risk and build the technology, improve the path, but it leaves nothing to the talent and just a lot of money to those who copy. It's brilliant from a business perspective. It works, but it's just something that I don't like about it.
Actually, and on that point, I interviewed a guy called Christopher Schroeder, and he has a good, deep knowledge on the Middle East. And he said that sometimes it is good to have those copycats, because once they grow and maybe have a big IPO, like in the Middle East, there was a company called Souk.com, which was the Amazon of the Middle East, with obviously some differences for the regional setting. But when Amazon bought the company this year, he said that leaves more developers, entrepreneurs, who then leave that company and start up smaller companies. And as a result, that leads to more talent and more growth and more sharing of skills and education. I mean, do you think maybe sometimes copying is a good idea?
I think it's good to learn. I don't completely hate it, but I think it's the little companies that have had exits, at least in Colombia that I know of, have not left any wealth other than the founders. They really haven't. So the cultural, since there's no competition and the local investors really don't know a lot about like better practices of like reinvesting in wealth, and all your employees should be really well vested and they should, like, you want this to move forward. It really hasn't happened in Colombia specifically. I don't want to talk about any other country because I don't know a lot more about it, but I haven't seen anything left behind, because usually the founders here are not really technical. They're usually business people who saw the idea and they hired engineers locally, and they just pay them for it, have terrible business practices, terrible engineering cultures. They sell the company, they exit, but that's it. So there's no, like the difference in healthy ecosystems is that founders and key employees are usually technical, or they know a lot about, like, they come from similar sort of startup backgrounds where they've seen the cycle move forward, and they become, when they exit, they become investors and they fund again and they do that. I haven't seen that in Colombia. Maybe we haven't had enough cycles, but I've seen people who have exited and that's it. I want to be proven wrong. I want to believe that it's possible. I just haven't seen it, and maybe it's just going to take a lot longer.
Okay. So last year you launched Charla, which is a monthly meetup for providing advanced technical knowledge in Spanish. What problem are you hoping to solve with your meetups online?
So there's 4 specific problems I'm trying to solve. One is that there's no access to very recent or bleeding edge content about technical knowledge, whether it's software engineering, software design, software architecture, design in general, UI, UX, visual design, and in other disciplines. There's not a lot of bleeding edge content in Spanish accessible. So I'm trying to bridge the gap a little bit there. I don't think that it's a sustainable path forward, but we're not in a great path to learn to speak English in the region, everyone. So at least I think if people become interested, they probably can break those barriers easier if they see what's possible, what's out there. Second is the density problem. As much as we can have a healthy JavaScript meetup in Colombia, in Medellin or in Bogota, in the Amazons, there's probably one. Like in Leticia, there's probably 1 or 2 people. I'm extrapolating. I also don't want to be insensitive, but there's probably less people who can have this experience, who are also at a place where they can share it. So by starting Charla, I think that we can increase accessibility to people who don't have any local resources as far as this. I think finally it's the access not only to local experience, but also to break down or to bridge the gap of experience. There's not a lot of people who are encouraged to share their knowledge at work. So we have great companies, probably banks that have super interesting challenges of how to solve specific problems, but employees are not encouraged to share, and there's not a culture of sharing experience, even if it's not business critical or very specific about like it's not intellectual property. So hopefully we can expose a little bit more of that production level experience to other people. And then I think finally setting role models. We're used to seeing people from other cultures talk to us and teach us, and it's probably further to see yourself if you see this Silicon Valley engineer who has a degree in computer science in Stanford and works for Google and has been super successful, and relating to that experience is a lot. It's much further than seeing someone who looks like you, who speaks like you, who likes very similar things like you, and who is also has solved very difficult or has encountered very interesting experiences. And I think it's something that we're missing, because even if you see like international events, including I'm gonna deny it, JSConf Colombia, include a big component of having people from developed countries come to talk to us, come to teach to us, and there's this colonial aspect that I feel very uncomfortable by. This may sound rough, but by bringing white people to teach us, I don't think it's sustainable. I think we have to do this for ourselves a little bit more, and maybe at some point we're leading industries. But right now, those are the four challenges that I would really like to, at least not. I don't think I can solve them, but move them a little forward. That'd be cool.
Okay. And since you started the meetup, what's been the response from the community and the developers who have signed up each month?
It's been slowly growing. I of course wish it was much larger, right? Like, but I think I don't remember, but the first Charla has over 1,500 views. That's much more impact that we could have on any local meetup. So it's very positive. We're steady rolling. I think we've had 5 episodes so far. That's 15 speakers. But now those videos are published. Now we're starting to publish individual videos of each talk. We've had some great talks. We've had some okay talks. But the cool thing is that all of them have been in Spanish of advanced technical knowledge. And I think it'll continue to grow in the same way that we've grown our local meetups. It'll take some time as people get to know us. And we're also moving away from the Colombian specific region. This is aimed towards anyone in Spanish speaking countries. It is a different time zone than Spain. Probably the difficult, but we're still recording the content and it is available to everyone. So hopefully it'll pick up more.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for that, Juan, and thank you again for coming on the show, and we look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you so much for your time, Carl. It's been fantastic. You've had some great questions, and I really appreciate the effort you invested in this.
Okay, thank you. Cheers.
Thank you.
Simplify continuous delivery with GoCD, the on-premise, open-source, continuous delivery tool by ThoughtWorks. With GoCD, you can easily model complex deployment workflows using pipelines and visualize them end-to-end with the value stream map. You get complete visibility into and control over your company's deployments. At gocd.org/sedaily, find out how to bring continuous delivery to your teams. Say goodbye to deployment panic and hello to consistent, predictable deliveries. Visit gocd.org/sedaily to learn more about GoCD. Commercial support and enterprise add-ons, including disaster recovery, are available. Thanks to GoCD for being a continued sponsor of Software Engineering Daily.
Wow!